Hi everyone. I gave the keynote at the ShipItCon conference in Dublin, Ireland, at the Mansion House last Friday. And I'm actually not sure if it was recorded, so I thought I'd give it one more clean take for posterity. So here it goes. This is going to be basically a bit of a tour of what I'm thinking here as we stand at the cusp of the age of AI. I'm CEO and co-founder of Gentic, building infrastructure for agents to get real work done. And I'm also on the Irish government's AI Advisory Council. But mostly I'm someone who's been through multiple technology waves. I was a super early co-founder and CTO of Forest, back when SaaS wasn't even a word that we used. I co-founded Demonware in 2003 after that, building infrastructure and low-level network code for games just before online gaming became a huge thing and Call of Duty became one of the biggest games of all time. Later, I did a lot more SaaS, more games, more media, and then a stint in ad tech, and now AI agents, of course. I've seen all these tech cycles come and go, and here's a lesson. Just because something's hype doesn't mean it's not real. For example, at Gentic, our engineers don't actually code anymore. They drop into code for debugging and review, but coding is the machine's job, and the humans are there to do architecture and systems design. That's revolutionary. The new bleeding edge is figuring out how to combine AI with agile engineering practices. For example, the BMAD method, which is only a few weeks old. I'm coming up with multi-agent architectures where the agents are essentially practicing software engineering with each other. And in a surprise turn of events, waterfall software development is back, just folded into AI speed, faster iterations. When AI generates complete integrations or implementations from specs in minutes, Agile begins to feel quite human-paced, actually. The jobs market is getting weird, at least here in Ireland, but I think internationally. Computer science grads can't find jobs. Law firms are cutting intake. Customer service is actually an early casualty of all this. And tech giants are beginning to talk openly about their AI-related layoffs. We're not even 3 years into this yet, so we can be sure that this is not business as usual. This is ground shifting beneath our feet. My journey to all this started a few years ago. Soon after ChatGPT launched, I started a stint in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, the leading Irish accelerator and incubation space. I was an entrepreneur in residence there, helping and advising other startups while trying to figure out my own next move. I'd spent a year working with them, advising those startups, and simultaneously in the evenings playing with AI and pondering the consequences of all of this. And I realized that it's not just going to be about co-pilots helping us write emails and write code, but it's going to be about agents that do the work themselves. So I started pulling at that thread. I realized that these agents will displace humans one task, one workflow at a time. And as they do so, the software that those people used to use to do that work becomes redundant, one SaaS app at a time. And this is basically because agents don't need a user interface to help them use a database, right? They just use the database. They go direct. And therefore, broadly speaking, SaaS is dead. It's a series of existential crises if you're a software entrepreneur thinking about all of this. The first realization is that AI is going to write all the software, possibly on the fly, maybe even single-use software. But it gets worse when you realize that the agents themselves are going to replace a lot of the software, that you just don't need a lot of that software in the first place if the user is an agent. What's a software entrepreneur like me to do in this situation? Well, in my case, I stopped everything else and I started an AI startup called Gentic, and I jumped in headfirst. At Gentic, the goal is to help agents operate across the universe of APIs, which is where we think the future of agents in business is going to be. And this is mostly an old-fashioned kind of integration problem. But in the age of AI, it has a new kind of solution. Integration used to be solved for code. Now with AI, it's better to solve it with knowledge. Basically, an LLM really needs docs, and only docs, to use an API perfectly. So I assembled a kick-ass team of amazing founders, including Dorothy Craven and Michael Cordner, raised a ton of money, and we hired a bunch of amazing people. And we've spent over a year in the space now, building infrastructure for AI agents and agents themselves. And we've realized some things that have surprised even us, and some of them are even still a little bit controversial. First, many people, I'm kind of talking about investors, think that if SaaS is dead, that's going to be okay because it's going to be replaced one for one with agents as a service, AaaS, if you will. People are literally saying that. Well, I think it's actually going to look quite different on the ground. Agents are problem solvers, general purpose problem solvers. Let's consider coder agents for a moment, which is what software engineers are quite familiar with and are very advanced. They come out of the box tooled up for coding. So they've got things like grep and sed and diff and equivalents to those kinds of tools. But you can get them to do other stuff, right? You just get them to do it in Markdown, for example. You can get Cursor to write a legal document. You can get it to analyze a budget or a shareholder agreement or write an addendum to that existing legal info documentation. You can even get it to do a unit test, if you think about that hard enough. You can get it to write all of your blog posts, your marketing, and if you begin to add tools into it, right? So these could be MCP tools, or maybe you just give it some open API docs and tell it to use curl. They'll start turning into general purpose personal assistants. They will try to do whatever you ask them to, given the tools available to them, including calling APIs, updating data, using databases, doing data science, whatever you have. Right? This tells us something. Apart from coder agents, we're seeing like pre-packaged general purpose agents emerging, like Manus. And you could look at the new browser agents like Perplexity, Orbit, ChatGPT, Agent, Fellow, for example, as self-driving web browsers that go around the web doing your research and doing your work. These are also generic pieces of software. Right. So my point here is about generic. Agents are on course to become general purpose pieces of software, not specific to particular industries, but they will do whatever you ask of them, limited only by the tools and the data you give them access to. And another surprising thing when you lift the HUD on a lot of these agents and look at the code is how simple they can actually be. For example, the kind of agent that I'm normally talking about, basically an API agent, is really just a piece of glue between an LLM and a set of APIs. And if you have suitable API management, right, agentic API management, for example, thanks to Gentic, you can write one of these in as few as like a few hundred lines of code, really. We've actually open sourced a library recently at Gentic called Standard Agent, deliberately named to be as boring as possible because we don't think this is the exciting bit. And that's a from the ground up, soup to nuts agent library written in Python with just, last time I checked, 824 lines of Python code in it. That's all it took. And that is, well, that's scary, right? That's slightly over 800 lines of code that can replace a lot of kinds of software that's out there in the world today. So take, for example, a company that needs a rostering system. They previously would have had to go out and see if they can find a SaaS solution that fits their very particular needs and how they want to do business, or maybe build something bespoke. But in this new agent world, they can get one of these general purpose agents and just hook it up to Slack or email, maybe up to SMS over an API like Twilio or something, right? And give it access to a spreadsheet and some databases, and just a prompt telling it what you want it to do. And it will sit there looking at email, looking at Slack, looking for requests for time off maybe, right? Looking at who else has time off, trying to slot those things together, maybe looking out for a request from you, the business owner, to devise the roster for next week, given all of these constraints, emailing everyone as necessary. This kind of thing is possible today, right? So that's a piece of general purpose agent code that replaces a whole category of SaaS. And there's plenty of examples like this if you look around. Software blinking out of existence thanks to general purpose agents. So we're looking at this future where a few general purpose agents, or maybe many of them will be open source as well, can replace huge swathes of not just tasks and workflows and employees who used to do them, but software itself. But maybe it will also replace business as we know it. I mean, what is a business exactly, except a collection of data infrastructure and workflows and a bank account? Just business logic executing on top of APIs. Maybe today with a user interface in the middle, but not necessarily. If all that business logic can be properly written down and handed to an agent, well, what exactly is left in the business then? And that brings us to the notion of what does AI native business actually mean? I struggled with this a lot late last year and early this year because I knew that Gentic had to be an AI native business or get killed by one. but I just didn't know what exactly that meant. But I think I figured it out now. Right. In my view, an AI native business is basically an AI system. It is itself an AI system. It's a collection of agents, a multi-agent system, if you will. Maybe there's some regular old software sprinkled around in there, APIs, etc. But all of this is hanging together, working stably, and performs the business of the company, ranging from sales, engineering, finance, support, whatever you have. And yes, there will still be humans in the picture, but they're going to be the maintenance crew for the AI. They're to optimize and build and maybe even govern it, but never to do the work itself. And this kind of company has quite different dynamics. It will have fewer people in it because the workforce will never have to scale to meet demand. And it makes sense that that smaller crew of people maintaining that robot will want higher ownership, to be shareholders in that robot. After all, in the future where labor gets compressed, all that's really left is asset ownership. It's the only thing left for those employees to play for. So if those people who can build that robot are important, they're going to look for that and you've got to give it to them. So we have small crews of people maintaining robots that are scaling to meet demand, and those crews are shareholders in that robot. That's my picture of the AI native company. But this gets us to the question of who's going to be most effective on this kind of robot maintenance crew. Or how can we make sure that we're going to be effective? Basically, how can we as humans maintain some kind of edge over AI? Now, maybe you're old enough to remember when Big Blue bet Kasparov at chess, right? This was a big deal at the time. Humanity had several convulsions over it because we thought that meant computers must be intelligent, right? But soon we decided that chess actually wasn't such a big deal after all, not really a hallmark of true human intelligence. And we moved on. And about 10 years later, Watson won at the game Jeopardy. And we went through it all over again. But we redrew the borders and said, well, that wasn't really intelligence either. And then maybe not quite 10 years later, AlphaGo bet Lee Sedol at Go, right? 2016, I think, right? And we gerrymandered the definition of intelligence again, right? So we've been in this pattern for a while. With ChatGPT and in the following years, we saw a huge leap forward. LLMs, even from the first ChatGPT, generating sonnets, poetry that actually seemed to rhyme and follow the theme you wanted. You know, sonnets written in a pirate voice if you want. Right. And we moved to definitions. And then we saw, stable diffusion and all of the other diffusion models, and now video models generating art, generating images, generating video, generating music, right? And we've been busy gerrymandering those definitions of intelligence. So what is this shrinking domain that we are actually good at? There's lots of proclamations out there that next token prediction is just a statistical trick and that we should move on, essentially, that LLMs are just a stochastic parrot, that they can never match the true quality, that true ineffable quality of human intelligence. Well, I find this all a bit sus, mostly because, well, on one hand, predicting the next token is a remarkable feat that kind of involves understanding the world and the universe to figure out what actually is the plausible next token. But the other one is this idea that there's something ineffable there that we can never describe. It's basically an unfalsifiable proposition and gets my hackles up, right? And we should always be on high alert for some bullshit when someone's defending an unfalsifiable position. But personally, I do think that at least today, there are things that humans are better at innately than LLMs. But I also know that a huge number of people for centuries, maybe for thousands of years, have been coasting by doing very little more than putting one plausible word after another. And LLMs are showing those people up. If we want to earn a place in that robot maintenance crew, it becomes very important for us to figure out exactly what that little piece of human intelligence is that we need to excel at so that we can bring something accretive to the team, because the machine's always going to beat us at that level from now on. This is definitely bad news for people who live by frameworks. Frameworks they learned in books, they bought in the airport or in their MBA, etc. AI already knows all the frameworks and it can write a lot faster than any of them or any of us. Right? For framework work, you can just ask the LLM, it's already perfect at that. As humans, we need to be thinking at a higher order, basically in multiple dimensions about the big picture, the architecture. I would argue that everything for humans from now on has to be this big picture stuff. In particular, Today, LLMs aren't good at reasoning spatially or visually about problems. Not in any way that's quick or useful, at least. They are fundamentally trained on one-dimensional data, strings of tokens predicting the next token, one after another. Even tiny animals can do more than this and can adeptly navigate a 3D environment better than the biggest, most advanced frontier model, and definitely far less power or energy. So both the LLMs and us are neural nets, essentially, but as animals, like, it's not just one big blob. We've evolved a fairly complex architecture, like a network of neural nets, that we're carrying around in our heads. And we have this multidimensional spatial reasoning because of the environment we evolved in that's bleeding and has bled over into other areas, like our ability to make complex abstract plans, or that feeling that we can see the architecture of the software or the application we're working on, even though we can't quite see it. It's not quite the same thing, but it feels like the same part of our brains getting hot, right? And we can intuit that if we change one thing, it's going to have knock-on effects on other places, and we know where to look and know where to analyze to remediate those. When you work with an LLM, any kind of coding assistant, it's great at the code level, great at the function level, but it's immediately apparent that it has no big picture. It has no mental model of the architecture in its head. It keeps on making stupid errors at that level. They might catch up with us, especially as they get better trained for robotics, for example, but they do seem to have a long way to go, at least today. And it might be possible that it requires some kind of fundamental architectural advance beyond the transformer for them to actually get good at this. And that might be an obvious advance. It might be an automatic, one of these automatic month-to-month advances we have. Or it could take 5 years or 10 years. It could be hard. There's a second area that humans have an edge on today. And this is the eureka moment, those flashes of insight. One of my advisors, the entrepreneur and I would say deep thinker, Mark Cummins, proposed this in his blog. He called it System 3 thinking. Right, so for those of you familiar with the very famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, about Kahneman and Tversky's life work. System 1 is that fast reflexive thinking you have, right? I say cloud, you say rain, because it's Ireland. System 2 thinking is the explicit logical thought that gets layered on top of that, right? So I ask you to do some maths, like what's 87 multiplied by 3? You're gonna work it out and slow down and think it through. LLMs are like pure system 1, right? Thinking models are like system 2 with chain of thought reasoning layered on top. But system 3 is where we have this ability to make a significant nonlinear jump, some kind of deep insight, sometimes after incubating the idea for a long time in our heads, days, weeks, months, maybe years sometimes. So it's not like something that happens frequently to us. It takes a lot of work. And it's a bit fuzzy, even to us, how it actually happens. Maybe what we're doing is fine-tuning or test time training, if you like, our own neural nets over a long time as we walk around pondering it and sleeping on it. But whatever it is, I think we can agree that if LLMs existed 110 years ago when Einstein was working out his theories, it just seems preposterous to me that they could ever have come up with the solution that gravity is actually our subjective experience of an object taking the shortest distance path through a space-time field that's been warped by mass. Right? That's crazy, right? Only Einstein could look at the problem that way. LLMs could never have got there. So to earn our place on the robot maintenance crew, we have to find a way to operate at that kind of level, right? Maybe not quite Einstein. I wish, but maybe not there, but definitely above ChatGPT's level of putting basically one word after another. The original Transformer paper was called Attention is All You Need. And I want to commandeer this phrase a bit for humans and say attention is all we have. We've learned from working with LLMs that good results come from good context engineering, basically carefully curating the diet of information we put into the LLM, both to make sure that it's properly informed about the problem at hand, but also to focus its attention on where it should apply its intelligence. We should be doing ourselves at least the same favor. We need to curate our inputs, design our days so that our best energy goes on the problems that we think are worth it. Right? Build an information diet for ourselves that feeds leaps, not doom loops. What we read, watch, discuss, and choose to do affects the quality of our brains and our thinking and what we're capable of. So we need to protect our attention, right? Budget our energy and direct our creativity purposefully to where we want it to be. And we need to avoid cognitively trashing around too many problems in a single day and find that space for deep thinking and high leverage impact that we can make with those leaps of insight every so often. A lot of quotes get associated with them, but let's say it was Mark Twain said, "Don't argue with idiots, they'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience." We have a version of this on the internet, which is basically don't feed the trolls. But with AI, we have to go a step further, right? We've got to be careful not just about what we post online or what threads we reply on, but we've got to be careful about what we read, like actively careful about what we put in our brains. The open web has been full of junk and ad fuel clickbait for maybe 15 or more years at this point. But now it's, the technical term we have now is enshittified, right? The web is enshittified with AI slop. It's not just agents spamming blogs and forums with infinite amounts of bland content with no real information or insights in them. Unfortunately, we are in on it as well. We just need to look at LinkedIn. It's full of humans pushing these fake plastic posts celebrating their work anniversaries. You know, the type, you can see them a mile off if you just squint a bit, and you can make out those rocket ship emojis all over the place and, redundant M dashes. YouTube's filling up with this stuff as well. If you spend any time on there, you will have noticed the AI voices reading the AI scripts, possibly on an AI background. And the same's happening to TikTok. And I understand that Pinterest is long gone, it just being images. This isn't just a giant tsunami of low-grade content hitting us from all sides on all the channels that we used to use. It's worse than that. It's the feed algorithms themselves. So we have these creators, part human, part machine, basically, just cogs in this algorithm, responding like Pavlov's dogs to the little treats that the algorithm feeds them. Engaging with any of this can suck us in too. These ML algorithms are basically impossible to beat. They're fine-tuned at massive scale against humanity to hijack your amygdala long before your conscious brain figures out what the hell's happening. And once you're sucked in, well, you could find yourself in a world of hundreds of millions of people having very excited arguments, highly polarized things, all dancing really to the algorithm's tune, not to anything that those people carefully decided to get involved in. I think this is all just one big mind trap for us, for humans. And it's more important now than ever that we take some control and exert strong agency over where we choose to place our attention, so that we have a chance of rising above the machine's level of thinking and make our own impact. And anyway, just from a self-respect point of view, it's degrading to be some kind of leaf blowing around this, ML optimized, AI fueled 24/7 online melodrama, which probably wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for advertising. So let's zoom out for a little bit. I've been talking a lot about our future as engineers and employees, trying to maybe be shareholders in some kind of AI maintenance crew in an AI native company. But there's a bigger picture. These companies, our companies today, the companies of the future, will still exist in countries. So let's talk about that, right? Dublin, Ireland, the EU, geopolitics. AI, it turns out, is not just another neutral technology, right? This is a new one for me. AI is politics, it's power, it's economics, it's hybrid warfare. And now, with drones, it's inverted actual physical warfare as well. All right, working on AI feels like you're working adjacent to some kind of Manhattan project, in danger of being conscripted into some secret project in the desert. Let's conservatively imagine that AI transforms society at the same rate that the web did. So that's probably about 15 years, from the Mosaic browser in the early 90s up to people shopping on Amazon using their iPhones for stuff they heard about on Facebook, right? Circa 2007, 2008. So what will our economy look like after that? In 2037, which would be 15 years from the launch of ChatGPT. When AI displaces human labor, it reduces the redistribution of wealth through employment, while simultaneously flowing capital out of your economy in the form of API fees to the AI companies. It's reasonably fair, I think, to expect that there's going to be a massive economic productivity boost from AI all around in all companies, large and small, who adopt it. But there's really no basis to think that any of that boost is going to get shared. So I'm concerned about wealth distribution and the economic model. The shareholders in a lot of companies should do quite well out of this. Certainly the shareholders in the successful AI companies that are fueling the whole thing. But most countries in the world aren't going to have any of those big successful AI companies, and what industry they do have could be cynically viewed by some economists as little more than local distribution for American AI. And we're based in Europe. Europe's already bleeding hundreds of billions of dollars every year to foreign technology providers who provide us with the underpinnings of our business and government, right, of our cloud services, etc. And sometimes, as we've seen recently, they take it away under political pressure. This is not a very tenable situation, and AI is set to 10x this problem. If AI replaces human labor, what's going to fund social welfare, the social net, to keep all of our people afloat? It's not going to be PAYE employment taxes, given that the highest paid white collar jobs are the first ones to go. It's possibly not going to be corporate profits, at least not from regular bricks and mortar companies, because if they've embraced AI, they will have largely replaced their labor costs with API fees. And from Ireland's perspective, it's vital that we find some way to participate in this global future AI economy. And ideally, we should be seeking to get a bit more than our fair share. Luckily, we do have some cards to play. Many, and I mean the vast majority of the big tech giants that are about to grow even bigger have significant investment already in Ireland, and Ireland is in some way a second home to them. We already host an outsized portion of the internet in our nicely temperate climate. We have an abundance of wind energy fresh off the Atlantic. And we actually have supply chains that know how to build and operate data centers because of our legacy of data center infrastructure from the last 20, 25 years. We should be strongly positioned to host AI inference infrastructure and to participate in the economy from that perspective. It's our chance to be a producer, basically, not just a consumer. But AI is all about energy. We're held back by an inadequate national grid, no clear vision, poor coordination across different sectors of government, an outdated public opposition to nuclear, rooted in Sellafield in the 1980s and not really aware of the emerging technologies in the field like modular nuclear reactors. We have a planning quagmire preventing the construction of new data centers and new wind farms to power them. And we have no real plan on how to decarbonize. Our plan involves gas, wind backed up by gas. So at the same time as we have wind farms discarding excess energy on one side of a country that you can drive across in 2.5 hours, a $300 million data center is pulled from the M50 in Dublin because it couldn't get an electricity connection. Right? This is terrible. Right? The stakes are high. We should be participating in the future, feeding it with good, clean Irish energy. It's vital. We should be welcoming the largest data centers we can to this country. It should be our vision and our goal that we are where they want to be. The other area that Ireland can participate in is by continuing to be a country that's very open and very friendly for business, right? Low bureaucracy and pragmatic. So let's talk about regulation. Let's be realistic. Regulation is necessary, but it's a pain in the ass. No one anywhere wants to end up in hospital due to poisonous food or lose their home or end up underwater financially because of another financial crash. But regulation is also a practical political tool, a non-tariff trade barrier, kind of below the belt punch in a dirty bare-knuckle fight of international diplomacy. In addition, regulatory capture is very hard to avoid, with incumbent companies often leading the call for regulation because it erects a legal barrier against newcomers into their industries. Even a very idealistic regulation like GDPR was widely perceived as a non-tariff trade barrier by companies like Google and Meta, whether it was intended that way by some people. But ironically, in the end, it ended up giving them a huge market advantage because of their economies of scale and the vast amount of first-party data that they could leverage that small domestic companies couldn't. And so, if it was a non-tariff trade barrier, it definitely backfired. Anyway, international corporate giants can always staff up against any number of regulators and happily play for stalemate, not to win. While small indigenous companies get ground down and scared off the whole thing. Even in the most clear-cut case, like, say, central bank regulation to avoid another financial crash, we should be clear-eyed about the global situation. America's government and corporates are becoming kind of indistinguishable, while China's corporates are basically owned by the government. In each superpower, technology and finance and government are now aligned, and they are projecting their power across the world. This is really blatant with stablecoins right now. With a world that's changed so rapidly since the financial crash, it might be necessary for Europe to kind of read the situation a bit and allow politics to lead over regulation just for a little while. 1 year ago, the Drago report came out, a report commissioned by the EU about the EU, led by an EU insider. But it was scathing. It eviscerated the EU and painted a clear picture of Europe's past and of Europe at a crossroads. Basically, in the mid-90s, Europe and the US had about the same GDP. And then the US embraced the internet and digitized while Europe held back, largely leaning in only when it could buy it from the US tech giants. And now Europe's digital infrastructure is American, and Europe stands at a new fork in the road. Down one path is more of the same, America innovating and Europe regulating. This is the path that's landed us with an intractable, inscrutable, and highly punitive EU AI Act just at the cusp of this new revolution. Down the other path, we need to recognize that the multilateral global order, the Pax Americana, is gone. And we actually now need to fight for the EU to even have a right to exist in this new world. We have no real energy policy, no coherent defense policy, and we have such regulatory complexity in Europe that most of us prefer to trade with Americans than with each other. America and China are in the lead, at the table. Europe wants to be at the table, but does Europe realize it's probably not even in the room? There's a famous curse, speaking of China, that says, may you live in interesting times. Well, we certainly are, but they are exciting times too. There's going to be new winners and losers, and what we can try to do is be clear about the reality and that this new alien intelligence has landed on planet Earth and joined our companies, and we're trying to figure out how to work with it. It's simultaneously superhuman and thick as shit. But we can all do previously unimaginable things if we can just learn how to work with it properly. Not only would this be a new information revolution, but AI might do amazing things like help us solve climate change, aging, food production. And maybe if we put it in charge of things, we can actually avoid war and pestilence and genocide for a change. To get there, we need to start with understanding the situation and choose to lead rather than follow, starting with ourselves and our companies and extending that right up through our local and national politics, and perhaps right up to European reform. The key takeaways today is that, first of all, agents are going to absorb software and possibly the companies themselves. And AI native companies are going to outcompete everything else. And it's going to upend our economic order. And we need a plan for that. Each of us needs to try to get ourselves into a robot maintenance crew of one of these companies and make sure that we get some shares in that robot while we're at it. And we should support our leaders locally, nationally, in Europe, who have their eyes open to the reality about what's happening, about where Ireland sits within Europe and where Europe stands in the world and is willing to do something to improve it. The ground is shifting. The question for everyone here, for Dublin, for Ireland, maybe for Europe is, are we going to choose to be the architects of this transformation or its casualties? The time to choose is now, and the train is about to leave the station. Thank you.